Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Experience Maker Live Show. My name is Dan Gingiss, customer experience keynote speaker, author, and your host every week at noon Eastern of this fine program. Very excited to have you here today for another terrific episode. Hey, speaking of terrific episodes, if you happened to miss our 100th episode special, oh my gosh, you have to go back and watch this. It was absolutely incredible. We had 20 previous guests come back and tell their favorite customer experience story in 5 minutes or less. I had so much fun, and I've been getting so much great feedback about this episode. You can find it at this bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/TEM@100. That's the Experience Maker at 100. It'll bring you to the YouTube video recording of our 100th episode. So much fun. Definitely check it out, and please let me know what you think. I am very excited today to bring you another CMO. The last time we had a CMO on, I made the point that having been in marketing for 20 plus years, I love it when we get to talk to marketers about customer experience because let's face it, they are becoming one and the same. So today we have the CMO of a company called Simplr that is involved in outsourcing customer service. His name is Daniel Rodriguez. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you very much for having me, Dan. This is exciting.
I've been excited to chat with you because I've been sort of watching afar what Simplr's been up to, and you and I met briefly previously, but I've been really looking forward to the conversation. So why don't we start with just you introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about Simplr?
Yeah. So as you already mentioned, I run marketing here at Simplr. I think that and I think many people out there recognize that the consumer has kind of turned into Veruca Salt more recently. And in many ways, I think we're working with brands. We work with a lot of retail brands, a lot of B2B companies to really help them make sure that they do not neglect their customer and do not let down that very much Veruca Salt customer.
Yes, Veruca Salt, the reference from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the I want it now, I want everything now and exactly how I want it. So yes, customers have become certainly more demanding. A good pandemic will do that to you. So how are companies supposed to respond?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think that we've noticed, and we've gone and gotten some great data, quarterly data going back several years. It's actually predated the pandemic. That the customer behavior was shifting, and I think it was partly because the expectation around how a brand is going to deliver what I want from it has accelerated due to the Amazon effect, right? And you talk about this, and we cited this in the book that we wrote, citing you. So thank you very much, Dan. When we wrote about this in the book "Experience is Everything" that we just put out a few months ago, what has happened is that brands are being compared against the best experiences that they've had, right? And so this. Really, I will just blame Amazon because I think there are many ways they have done a great job of pushing the envelope around customer experience and making sure that they're satisfying an increasingly impetuous customer that is wanting to have something immediately. Amazon Prime felt amazing, and then Amazon Prime Now came out, and it kind of ruined people in some ways, because then they were like, I was fine waiting a day for my package, but my goodness, if I can actually interact with your brand and receive those goods before I even eat my next meal, all without having left my home, now that is my new expectation. And then when I go and interact with some other brand and I can't even get someone to answer a question that I have, let alone the whole purchase process, is completed. That we've seen is really this growing gap that's actually challenged brands, because that customer expectation has unfortunately accelerated during the pandemic. There was a 2-ish month period of time back in March, April, May of 2020, at the beginning of the lockdown here in the United States, where everyone was like in it together and supply chains were screwed up and daycares were closed and everything was going to hell in a handbasket. And so uh, there was a sense of, oh my gosh, we're not Veruca Salt anymore, and maybe the customer will give brands a break indefinitely. And just about 3 months after the shutdown, basically, uh, people went back to that previous behavior, and they no longer were feeling like they wanted to give a brand a break. And by giving a brand a break, I really specifically mean if you have one negative interaction with the brand, that you would then go and shop somewhere else. That being that kind of cutthroat in that consumer behavior.
All right, so I have to ask you a question, and I want you to give me a background on Simplr and what it is that you're doing to solve these problems that you just explained about the sort of Amazonification of business and of e-commerce, especially, and the expectations. And so, how do you help companies to overcome that?
So I think that one of the challenges that brands that are starting to expand past their own internal capacity to deal with customers, right? Where they've hired only internally, they feel like they have a good handle on the cadence that they have with their customers, but they're growing as a company. There's this hamster wheel effect that I think a lot of companies end up feeling like they get on, and I'm particularly talking about customer service leaders. And one of the things I think that we talk with a lot of people about is, what's the plan? Like, how are you going to get off this hamster wheel? And this hamster wheel comes in the form of the training, the attrition, the the challenges that people have with actually getting people to stick around. So retention, becomes an issue. And in today's labor market, which has been really wonky, I think for a lot of brands, it's become increasingly difficult for them to just figure out, like, how do I staff appropriately? But I think even past that, they're also looking at questions around automation. And they're saying, how do I provide a customer experience that is going to be cost efficient, certainly, but is also going to satisfy this now customer? And so, how are we going to put the right pieces in place so that when somebody comes, for instance, to our website with a pre-sale inquiry through our chat window, which we know we need to have chat because now that's just table stakes. And we know we probably need to be able to have chat 24/7, but that feels difficult. How do we have automation playing a role there? When should we introduce a bot? When does a bot become a hindrance to having a great customer experience? Post sale, when people have a return or warranty question, they need certain types of things to be able to be answered in a way that's on brand. And we hear this over and over again, how valuable it is for on brand responses to be able to help with things like loyalty and retention. And there's a lot of questions that people then have about, should I be using a bot in a certain interaction? Should I be using my internal people in an interaction? And how can I make sure that I'm able to rely on the quality that will come from external folks being involved in that process? And so, in many ways, right? I mean, because we have technology components that we can help people with in the form of bots, and we also have labor components that we can help people with in a way that's really tackles some of those challenges that people have around that kind of like fixed resourcing contact center model. And that's kind of what we're able to provide to people, which is really solving in many ways, not for just cost, not right. It's solving for quality interactions with customers that drive better conversion rates on the website, that are leading to higher customer effort scores, meaning we are reducing low customer effort score interactions, which are bad. We don't want people to have a low score. We want the effort itself to be low, but we don't want the score to be low. And in those cases, that also leads to increased loyalty.
So how do you, when you're an outsourced company and so these are not employees working for the company, how do you connect them back to the culture of the company, really kind of gaining that knowledge that you have when you're an employee? In other words, so that the customer really does, I'm assuming that the goal is the customer shouldn't know whether the contact center is outsourced or not. That's irrelevant to the customer. So tell me about how you do that in terms of training and other types of integration.
Yeah, and you're right. You don't want there to be some sense of, I'm dealing with somebody. What we're trying to do, of course, and I think what we've successfully done is replicate the quality that you get from your internal team. Now, sometimes there are things that the internal team, you want to make sure your internal team is handling. So we're not coming in and saying, don't have your internal team doing, anything. We should be doing all of the things. But at the same time, what we have been able to do with our technology platform is replicate a lot of the onboarding and training that would then happen. Usually that would happen for most people in like a contact center environment. That would happen in a ramp period. There would be a 3 to 6 week period of time, sometimes even longer for some brands, where they are, they're getting people on the procedures, but also on some of the brand guidelines. What we have done is we've taken those guidelines and actually put them into our platform so that in the moment when somebody is responding, they have kind of guardrails. Like, for instance, a brand that uses a certain type of language in a first interaction. So one of our we call our customers partners. So one of our partners wants to use language like howdy when they are interacting with a customer for the first time, because that's on brand for them. We have then put that into our system in a way that it is a person responding, but they are unable to not use that language. So the language is programmed into the language that they're using, because we're doing digital channels. So it allows us to control that language completely.
Gotcha. Okay. So that helps because then because the digital piece, yeah, when you can insert that in automatically, that's pretty cool. So let's talk about there's a quote that I put in my book by somebody much smarter than I, Chris Zane, who's the founder of Zane Cycles. And he says that customer service is what happens when customer experience breaks. And I think that's such an interesting quote, because really, if customer experience is perfect, no one ever has to call, no one ever has to, enter a chat or tweet at a company or anything, because everything's perfect. So how do we balance this idea of, nobody wants to be in a customer service engagement because generally something previous to that went wrong. And yet it's a huge opportunity for a company to not only turn things around, but to really generate loyalty. So how do you balance that?
Well, I mean, there's two things here, right? One is that there is data that in the effortless experience, right, they show, and it feels counterintuitive if you haven't seen the data before, but like, hey, you have your regular customer that didn't have to interact with customer service, didn't have anything wrong, and they have a certain amount of loyalty on average. And then you've got people where something broke and it has not gone well, and that they then interact with your customer service. And if you do customer service well, that cohort of customers actually has higher loyalty, which feels weird. You're like, we screwed up with you, yet you're actually happier. So I think that there's a lot of emphasis that brands know they should have on making sure that once things have gone poorly, because they are going to, that you get it right. And by getting it right, it means it has to be expedient and it has to be resolved. You can't just get back to somebody quickly and call that a victory. Some of these contact center metrics, like FRT, first response time, great. You responded to someone quickly, but you didn't solve their problem for 30 hours. So that person is not going to then think about your brand that well. So that's kind of the first point. I think the second point, which I think gets really to what Chris Zane is talking about, is that you need to use what you learn from customer interactions that have gone poorly to improve the customer experience. And if you do not have a feedback mechanism within your company to say, here are the buckets of things that are going wrong with customers right now. How is that informing product, the product roadmap? How is that informing what we are promising people in the sales cycle? Are we over promising and under delivering in a way that is creating a mismatch, right? And I think that in a lot of organizations, there is tribal knowledge within the customer service team that is not getting back to other senior leaders within the company. And there is a classic tension, by the way, particularly in the software world, of build new versus fix the old. Because the building of the new represents new revenue and fixing of the old represents existing revenue. And all the metrics are about bringing on new revenue. So this is a very classic conundrum. But I think a lot of savvy leaders also know that the cheapest revenue is the revenue that you retain and grow. And because it's expensive to get new revenue. And businesses that are having this flywheel effect have positive net retention. They are growing the existing customer base, getting more money from them, and great linkage between making sure that things that are going wrong in customer service that can then improve the customer experience, I think helps to drive that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. That's why I always say that a remarkable customer experience is your best sales and marketing strategy. Because at the end of the day, if we're focused on the existing customers, the ones that pay the bills, that pay our salaries, that keep the lights on, if we provide a great experience for them, they're going to tell other people, and that's going to help with the acquisition in any way. But most importantly is you're going to stop what I like to call the leaky bucket, which is these customers that are leaving us because they're having a poor experience, they're fed up. They don't even tell us why. They just leave for the competition. And that is, of course, a double loss because we've lost a customer and the competition has gained one. I also think I've certainly read the same statistics about people who have had a service experience that has been resolved positively are more loyal. I do want to note, I don't think the goal should ever be to push a customer service experience in order to have that.
No.
But I think something you said that really is important to highlight is that people understand that companies aren't perfect. People understand that something's going to go wrong. And I think that that presents this moment of truth where we get to show, as companies, we get to show customers, are we there for you when it counts? And the best example maybe in history of this was the pandemic. And we learned very quickly which companies were there for us when the chips were down, when we needed them most, and which companies weren't. And that's why so many people have made no bones about switching allegiances to different brands during the pandemic when the experience wasn't what they were expecting and wasn't what they thought that they deserved for their hard-earned money. The last thing I'll say is, as you were talking about software companies, there's a small fix that I think that SaaS companies should make, which is to stop referring to customers as logos. It's almost the most insulting label that you can give because they're not just a logo for your brag page, right? They are a customer. They are a human being who's the buyer behind it. They're experiencing their own business challenges that they've come to you to help solve. So to call them a logo is basically like a bank calling somebody an account number, right? It's just not personal. And I think even in the B2B world, especially in the B2B world, that's something that has been missing. Yvonne, thank you for your comments. He refers to ROC's return on experience. I like that. I think that is an awesome new metric that we should be talking about. So what have you seen, Daniel, in the last 2 years that's really kind of shifted, and how has that changed how you guys perform your service?
So, I mean, I think one of the biggest things, this is also, I think, just great advice generally. If you're a customer service or have a broader mandate around customer experience, and you want to do a better job of investing dollars within your organization into your existing customers, which can be challenging, right? Because too often times there is a mandate from the top that says, customer service, you are a cost center. So how are you going to spend less money? And then your marketing counterpart is over here with an acquisition budget, and they're just asking the marketer, how much more money can we give you to efficiently spend? And it's like probably a very difficult power dynamic. And one of the things that we've seen is drawing more alignment between those two functional areas. You aren't necessarily going to, in a day, be able to say, hey, we really might want to have a dotted line relationship, or we might want to fold under a brand manager, right? But that's not a bad thing to aspire to draw that alignment. In the short term, you can also go over to your counterpart and say, would you mind running an experiment in investing in some of our retention through having a better customer service? We can be your guinea pig, and we can help you build the ROI model so that it's going to show that this is worth money to us as a company, that it's going to have it's a net positive ROI. And I've seen CMOs who are savvy be able to say, that's absolutely a great idea. We can carve out some budget to be able to show that. And lo and behold, they are basically helping to fund some of the better service arrangements that we end up seeing.
Yeah. And I mentioned at the top of the show, the sort of interaction with marketing. And, my belief is that today marketers' main goal is basically to promise the experience. And if you think about when we watch Super Bowl ads, or we see really any kind of marketing, basically what it's doing is it's telling us this is how it's going to feel like when you drive our car, or when you taste our coffee, or when you visit our amusement park. They're selling the experience. And so marketers' jobs are to really promise that. But then if there's no loop inside, like you mentioned, no closure of that loop, we risk over promising and under delivering. And that's why I think marketers have to be more connected to the actual experience, so that they are, so that they know how to talk about it, and that they're ensuring that what they're promising out in public is actually what's being delivered. So where to from here?
Where are we going from here? So I think we're going to see more brands recognize that if they are not solving for an immediate customer resolution throughout their buying journey with your customer, which includes pre-sale, which includes post-sale stuff, and if they're not making sure that they eliminate the really poor interactions, which means, to be clear, this means that you can't have them. It doesn't mean that you need to try to come close when things get busy. It means that you can't actually have these negative experiences, because those negative experiences have ripple effects. So what Dan was talking about, when people talk about, how people feel about it is the most important thing. And I agree. And I actually think that part of the way that people feel about a brand is also listening to their friends. And they learn about a brand's emotional connection from their friends. So I know that I have told so many people about how Zappos randomly bought me my pizza one time, and it was like a total surprise. And that idea of surprise and delight was something that made me certainly more loyal, but I was also spreading the word about Zappos. That is really difficult to quantify in terms of what the ROI is on that type of pizza buying campaign. But I know that the people in marketing at Zappos are saying, our cost of customer acquisition feels worth it, and we're getting great loyalty, and we're getting great repeat purchases. So I think that people that recognize we are making investments into a brand, and by making that investment in the brand, which is part of the customer service as well, that we are going to lead to more referrals. We're going to lead to fewer negative referrals going out there into the ether. Look at some of the disappointments that people have had with Peloton, for instance, as an example. Like, there were opportunities to probably better communicate more clearly with customers in a way that would have that would have had a fewer ripple effects. Certainly, I mean, yes, there were supply chain issues, and yes, there were issues that were happening, but we've seen the ability to kind of get out in front of it and to be able to communicate clearly is what kind of builds that loyalty.
I want to thank Daniel Rodriguez, the CMO of Simplr, for the great conversation. If you want to visit Simplr, they are at simplr.ai. That's Simplr.ai. Just don't put that E in there because they are simpler without the E. I also wanted to promo next week's guest because I'm very excited to have him on the show. He is Lamont Young. He is the EVP and head of both digital and customer experience at Citizens Financial Group. So we will be delving into financial services, an area that I spent more than 10 years in corporate America. So very excited to talk to him and see what's going on. I haven't been there in a few years, so see what's going on in the financial services space in terms of digital and customer experience. Thank you so much for being here on the Experience Maker Show. We'll see you next week and every week at noon Eastern. I'm Dan Gingiss, the Experience Maker. Have a great rest of the week.